Hello and welcome to my Codex comparison video between the 8th edition Adeptus Mechanicus Codex and the brand new 9th edition Codex Adeptus Mechanicus. I usually say this, but these comparison videos take me a long time. I talk for well over an hour at a time and then I go away and edit the videos. So your help and support to the channel in any form, liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and using the Element Games affiliate link to buy like a Mechanicus Combat Patrol or something will really help the channel out and motivate me to continue making all of this content. Will we ever get 40k rules for Mechanicum, you know, from all the units, the awesome looking units from Forge World? Fingers crossed. I've always got my fingers crossed for that. They did it with Custodes and their units. They brought them over to 40k. I'm hoping that they do that for Mechanicum at some point. But in the meantime, I was very pleased and wanted to support Adeptus Mechanicus at the time because when they were first released, I think in I want to say 14, 15 maybe, they came out in 2 books. There was the Skitarii and then the Mechanicus book, I think. They're packed away somewhere, but it was great to have a Mechanicus book that had everything in it. It was also quite a chunky book, you know, it's just slightly over 100 pages. It had knights in there as well, and now we've got this 9th edition book, which although has 16 more pages, it also includes all of the new units from their reinforcement wave when they brought out the Cerberus Silverhounds and their flyer as well from the Psychic Awakening book, Engine War. So we've got all 3 books here. We're going to do a comparison mainly with these 2, and I'll bring in some examples from Engine War. But this book here, well, the limited edition soft touch, there's no denying that cover art is absolutely beautiful, but one of those books will cost you £50. The actual codex itself is £30. Again, I go back to what I said about the Sisters book. I would much prefer these codexes to be 20 or even 25 at a maximum. £30 is way too much, unless it's like the Space Marine Codex, which has almost 300 pages or so. So, Adeptus Mechanicus, let's have a little bit of a recap with this book first of all. We had the Skitarii and the Vanguard units, but we also had the Knight Errant, Paladin, Warden, Gallant and Crusader. 5 extra knights in there. Unfortunately no armigers at all, but there we are. And then in the Engine War, they brought in the next wave of Mechanicus units in the form of the Tech Priest Manipulus, the Cerberus Silverhounds, the Raiders, the Taraxi Sterilizers and Skystalkers, the Scorpius Dune Rider, so the hover tank thing, and the Scorpius Disintegrator, and then the Flyer, the Archaeopter Transvector. So they did bring out a nice selection of reinforcements for them, which are all included in the Mechanicus. The thing you're not getting in the Mechanicus Codex now though is all of the knights, which is such a shame because Mars of course has knightly houses, and I think it's a huge omission for them to completely remove those rules from there, and maybe they've got something planned, but it seems like they're taking away a lot of content recently, and yeah. And by all means, if you've painted your knightly household from House Raven or something, then yeah, you're going to be a bit out of luck with this codex. You're going to have to wait until the Imperial Knight Codex comes out, which is probably going to be sometime next year. So throughout this comparison video, I'll have the 8th edition codex on the left side and the brand new 9th edition codex on the right side. So the inside cover art has got this amazing actual artwork of 2 Mars pattern Warhound Titans, both armed with the plasma blast guns and the Vulcan Megabolters. Looks incredible. This, we've just got the same dull, boring cover art as all of the other 9th edition 40k codexes. It's not bespoke, it's not fitting to the codex at all, it's just Game of Thrones Season 6, it's ridiculous. The Page Keeper, of course, is just part of the special edition book. You're not going to get that in the normal edition. I thought I'd just move the camera back a little bit for this particular video. So yeah, you've got these covers here. front pages, the contents, and you can see there 104 pages and 120, so you get 16 pages more. You're getting an introduction, it's about the same size, probably a bit more on the new codex. You're getting a different look at some artwork, but this one has nothing to do with the front cover, whereas this one is the front cover, so just repeated. And we're getting this awesome looking bit of artwork there, Disciples of the Machine God. You know, similar story, but I think this cover art, I think this artwork is nicer, in my opinion. You're getting the Red Planet, and then Strategic Disposition of a Forge World, Keepers of Divine Law. You've got that artwork that we just saw. You've got Skitarii Legions. You've got a map. You've got Warzone Metallica. There's a big focus on Metallica at the moment. You've got the iconography of Adeptus Mechanicus and the Arcane and the Ancient, Legio Cybernetica. Then you've got the different Forge Worlds. So you've got Lucius, Agrippnar, Styges, Greia, or Greia, however you want to pronounce that. You've got Metallica, Riser, Triplex Fall, Demos, Voss Prime, Griffin 4. And then you've got a load of nice colour options there. Anyway, moving back on this, it's focusing on some of the units, but it's not like really specific. Just realised I didn't have my light on, so apologies for that. Yeah, it doesn't like break it down to, oh, this is pages about Castellan robots, this is about data smiths. It's just a couple of them in that, and then for some reason it goes on to the explorator fleets. Then it talks about Mars and Belisarius Call, so it then focuses on a couple of units, particular, well, just Belisarius, and then it goes on to the Forge Worlds. So you've got the same Forge Worlds. It looks nice. You've got the colours. I prefer the layout of this one. Yeah, same Forge Worlds, and then you've got a nice little short story, and then Illuminatum Mechanicus, so you go straight into some models, showcasing those, whereas the older book goes to Mechanicus Knights and Questoris Mechanicus Heraldry. You've got different houses, look, House Raven, Vulca, and this one's focusing on the models. More models, look. Then we're into the rules. We're 46 pages in, and we're already at the rules. Whereas this one, you've got a nice timeline there. You got that beautiful cover art. You got that beautiful inside cover art, but in colour. You got a bit about Belisarius Call, and then this is what's great about the older codexes. You've got specific lore and information about those units. So one just about the engine seers and servitors, just about the robots, just about the priests, the Kataphron, breachers and destroyers, the rangers, the vanguard, the rustalkers. I mean, this is just fantastic if you're just getting into the hobby. You know, this codex is a mess, absolute mess. Whereas this one, it's you know, for newcomers, you can just look and read about all these units and you know, see if you like them, see if you want to add them to your army. And they've always done it like this, and it was just a shame that they changed the format to the new ones. You got the Sidonian Dragoons, the Dream Crawlers, and then Knights. Look, you've got a page, pretty much all the Knights: Paladin, Errant, Gallant and Crusader, all 5 of them there. And then you've got some images of the units, and they don't leave any out. You know, they've got all of the nice units there in the different colours and some Knights. Then you've got the Start Collecting box set there, as well as a larger army. And I much prefer to have that in these codexes. You know, have your combat patrol or Start Collecting, and then have a big force that you can think about adding to. Then you've got Defenders of the Forge World, so you've got all the Canticles of the Omnissiah, and then you're into the data sheets. So that codex obviously misses out on all of these rules. So these rules, you've got the section here, straight away, you know, you've got the combat patrol. It's a decent combat patrol, you know. It's a shame you're getting an engine seer though. I think I've got 2 of those. Would have been great to have something different. You know, I don't know, like the Marshal, which was the new model that they released at the same time as this box set. It's a complete shame because the Combat Patrol for Orcs is going to have the new models for their release. You've got detachment abilities, you've got the Forge Worlds, they're different rules. Like you've got Lucius, Agrippnar, Greia, so you've got a page per Forge World, so you can cherry pick those. or paint them to those Forge Worlds. You've got Distant Worlds, you've got Stratagems, you've got the Holy Orders, you've got the Warlord traits, you've got some relics, which are all, you know, towards the back of the 8th edition book. You've got chapter approvals and that lovely piece of artwork. You've got the Crusade rules again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 pages of Crusade rules. So yeah, again, almost 10% of the book on Crusade. Then you've got the Crusade armies, and you've got some data sheets. So this is great in that you've got the abilities and the canticles of the Omnissiah. They work a little bit different than they did before. You've got these doctrina imperatives. You've got an optimization and a depreciation. That's the way I'm reading it. It's not depreciation. I wish it was depreciation, but it's depreciation. It would have been preferable if it was a depreciation, but there you go. And then you're into the data sheet. So straight away, both books kick off with Belisarius' Call. He's had a massive power points cost decrease. Is now only power points cost of a 9, pretty much an auto include. It's fantastic. Before he cost 13 power points, so he's got dropped by 4 power points. His stat line remains exactly the same. You know, he's still got the 2+ for weapon skill and ballistic skill. His solar atomizer has had a buff. It's now got a damage characteristic of D3 + 3 at half range, and it's got the blast special rule. The arc scourge has had a buff with its armor penetration of -2 now, and you're wounding on 2+, which is a huge buff. The Mechadendrite hive is the same, and the Omniscient axe has had a buff. It's strength +2, so it's now strength 7. I always thought his strength is 6 was a bit weak. He's got the canticles of the Omnissiah. He's got his refractor field, so 5+ and vulnerable. He's got his Lord of Mars. He's got his Lead in Prayer, Master of Machines. Then you've got the Tech Priest Manipulus, and that's something that was missing from the 8th edition Codex, but it was in the Psychic Awakening book. They're leading with that. It's a power points cost of a 4. Compared to the Psychic Awakening book, which didn't come out that long ago in the grand scheme of things. It's the same power points cost, but he has had a buff. He's now got a ballistic skill of 2+. He's got more wounds. He's got 5 wounds, and his save remains the same. His weapons, the Magna Rail Lance, I always thought that was very short range. You'll be pleased to know it's now a 36-inch range for AP -3, and his damage is now a damage of 3 instead of a D3. The Transonic Cannon, which is a bit like a flamer, has had a buff to a 12-inch range, and the Mechadendrites now get a solid 3 additional attacks, whereas before they got D6. The Omniscient Staff has also had an increase of a strength +3, so strength 7 instead of the strength 6. And he's still got his canticles of Omnissiah. He's got Master of Machines and Galvanic Field, which works a little bit different than what it did do before. But he's missing out on the Blessed Bionics. The Tech Priest Dominus, he's had another large power points cost drop. It's now only a power points cost of a 4, whereas before he was a 7. Everything else remains the same in terms of his stat line. His weapons though, the Eradication Ray has 2 profiles. You can either fire a shorter range version, which is AP -3, or a longer range, which is -2, but it now has a blast special rule. The Macro Stubber remains the same, and the Phosphor Serpenta also remains the same. The Volkite Blaster has had a buff with the damage. It's now 2, and wound rolls of a 6 now inflict 2 mortal wounds, whereas before it was only 1. Abilities wise, you've got the Canticles of the Omnissiah, Master of Machines again, you've got the Refractor Field, and you've got Lord of the Machine Cult, but you are missing out on Masterwork Bionics. So before you could sort of repair his wounds and other friendly Mechanicus units, whereas now it's a friendly unit, and it's within 3 inches, so that includes himself. So it was better before when he could repair himself and friendly. You've got a new unit here, the Techno-Archaeologist. It's not a misprint. Games Workshop currently don't have a model for this unit separately. He was available in the Blackstone Fortress Escalation upgrade, which I think was about £50 or £60 or so. I missed out on that, and I, in hindsight, should have got it, because there's a couple of units in there that I would have liked to have picked up in the end. But pretty much, he's kind of like a lieutenant version of the Tech Priests. He's got like this servo arc claw, he's got a little eradication pistol, he's got some nice abilities, and that moves us quite nicely over to the Skitarii Marshal, which is again a little bit like a Skitarii Lieutenant, like a Vanguard Lieutenant. A brand new unit just for this book. He wasn't in the Psychic Awakening book. He's got his Radium Serpenta, which is quite nice. The review of him, if it's not out already, it'll be out very, very soon, where I'll go through all of his abilities. And then you've got a Tech Priest Engine Seer. Same power points cost, but he has had a bit of a buff. His ballistic skill now is 3+, which is quite nice, because before he only had a las pistol. Now he has a Mechanicus pistol, which double the number of shots, better strength at 4, really good armor penetration at -2 as well. So there is a reason to pick the Engine Seer because of that awesome pistol. Their servo arm works the same as it did before, but now you don't have to subtract 1 from the hit roll. So he's still got a 50-50 chance of hitting with that one attack. Abilities, got the Canticles of the Omnissiah, got enhanced bionics, so you're getting a 5+ invulnerable save. Before he just had bionics, was at 6+. So the Tech Priest Engine Seer has had a very decent buff and more bionics as well. Before he could repair friendly units, now he can still repair units, but it's D3 lost wounds, so it's better. He's also got Awaken the Machine and Brotherhood of the Cog. So Tech Priest Engine Seer, big buff there. You've got the Skitarii Rangers, which have had a huge power points cost drop. They're half the points cost as they were before. They're now only power points cost of a 2. Everything else remains the same. They're still pretty squishy. They're good to shoot things with. I can only look at the galvanic rifle right now, but looking at that, it has had a buff. You've got 2 shots there with a better AP. The arc rifle, if I was to look at the range weapons, their arc rifles are better. They're a 30-inch range rapid fire weapon with a better AP of -2 and a damage of D3. The plasma calivers have had a huge buff to a 30-inch range for Assault 2, and for a plasma weapon it's just absolutely fantastic. And the transuranic arquebus, you can fire that on the move now, and still has that ability to inflict mortal wounds. Enhanced data tethers are better than ever because of the Skitarii Marshal rules and the Canticles of the Omnissiah, with the optimization rules as well. Really worth picking up the enhanced data tethers for your units. Then you've got the Skitarii Vanguard. Again, they've had a power points cost reduction by half. They still work the same as they did before, but the radium carbines work a little bit different in that you're getting hit rolls of 6s, you're automatically wounding, whereas before on 6s you get damage of 2 instead. I think it's better that they can wound because their strength is only 3. They need all the help they can get. They've got all of the other weapons like the plasma calivers and things that the Rangers have, and you can even take transuranic arquebuses too, which I'm not sure they could take before, so you can have Vanguard with the arquebus. You've got the Kataphron breachers, which again, a lot of people overlook these because they look big and you think they're elites or heavy support, but they are actually troops. They've had a power points cost reduction. They're now a power points cost of a 6, and they've had a buff with their save. Their saves is now 2+. And that's a similar story to the destroyers. So these breachers having saves of 2+, excellent. Is it coincidence that the models included in the combat patrol have had a buff? Who knows? But the destroyers are now a 3+ save and they were a 4+, and the breachers are now a 2+ save, which is absolutely fantastic. Their weapons have had a buff too. Their heavy arc rifles are now a straight up damage 2 instead of a D3, and you're wounding vehicles, and against vehicles you're getting better damage. You're getting damage 3, and also you're wounding them on 4+, which is fantastic for those arc rifles. The torsion cannons had a massive buff, double the range, which is great for a cannon. 48 inches And you've got a damage of D3 plus 3, which is better than D6. The arc claws have also had an upgrade to a armor penetration of -3. On vehicles, it's a damage of 2, and they're wounding on 4+ against vehicles, which again is better than what they had before. The hydraulic claw has had a buff in that they're still strength ×2, so they're strength 10. They're better armor penetration at -2, and it's a solid damage of 3, and you don't have to subtract 1 from the hit roll. So breaches really have had a massive buff, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of them for their reduced points cost and all of these buffs that you're getting. You've got the Canticles of the Omnissiah, you've got Bionics, which is a 6+ invulnerable save, would have been nice with a 5+, and you've got Tracked Mobility. You've got Heavy Battle Servitor, so they don't suffer penalty to heavy weapons, and also they've got Tracked Mobility, which is a new rule where they can move through walls, girders, chains with the breachable terrain trait. The Destroyers have had an even better buff. There used to be a power points cost of a 10, they're now a 7, so that's 3, which is better than the 2 for the breachers. Their stat line has improved, they're now getting 3 attacks, whereas before they had a 2, and I've mentioned that their save is better at 3+. So toughness 5 with a strength, toughness 5 with a save of 3+, fantastic. The Cognus weapons have had a buff, big buff here. You can give them these Cognus Flamers, which have had a buff, which have had a range increase to 12 inches, and also Assault D6 plus 2. So yes, you're reading that right. Whatever you're going to roll on your D6, you're adding 2, you can possibly get 8 shots with these Flamers, and they automatically hit. The Heavy Grav Cannon remains the same, but against 3+ armor save, you're getting damage characteristic of a straight up 2 instead of D3. And the Phosphor Blaster works exactly the same as it did before. The Plasma Culverin is now called a Kataphron Plasma Culverin, and it just gains the blast rule on top of everything else. They've still got the Heavy Battle Servitor and the Track Mobility rule, but they've also got the Bionics as well. Not as many changes compared to the breaches. Then we've got Servitors. They've had a power points cost reduction by half. They're now only power points cost of a 2, but everything else remains the same. Obviously Blast. Obviously the Plasma Cannon's now got the Blast special rule. Heavy Bolter has been buffed to damage 2, and the Multi-Melter now gets double the number of shots. Interesting to note that the servo arm, there's a common theme between servo arms now, that they don't have that subtracting 1 from the hit roll. Because I mean, you know, think about it. If you've got servitors with servo arms, subtracting 1 from the hit roll means that you're going to be hitting things on a 6, you know, which is terrible. It's like, what's even the point? So yeah, having them hit on a 5+ is much better. Another buff that they've received is Bionics. They actually get an invulnerable save of 6+ now. They've got the Mind Lock rule, which works the same as it did before. And if you've got a Forge World Tech Priest, then they don't take up that elite choice. You've got the Fulgurite Electro-priests and the Skitarii Electro-priests. These have had the Fulgurite have had a power points cost drop, but their stat line remains the same. They're Electro Leech staves, only the damage has changed, and they're inflicting 2 mortal wounds whenever they wound on 6s instead of the D3. And they've got the Canticles of the Omnissiah, they've got the Voltgeist Field, which is a 5+ invulnerable save, and they've got the Siphon Vigor, which works a little bit differently. They've got the Fanatical Devotion as well, and they've also got a Voltgeist Blast as well. The Skitarii Electro-priests, same power points cost for them, and exactly the same stat line. Their Electrostatic Gauntlets are getting a better armor penetration, and instead of hit rolls of 6s, getting 3 additional hits, they're now only getting 2. The melee has had a nice buff though. It can now be the melee just is worded a bit different. You've got strength +2, which is 5, and that's what it was before, but you are getting the armor penetration of -1. They've also got Motive Foresight ability. You've got the Cybernetic Datasmith, which is right here. He's had a bit of a power points cost drop, which is great. His Gamma Pistol is better. It's now straight up damage 3, so be careful of that. But it no longer rerolls failed wounds against vehicles, unfortunately. The Power Fist works the same as before, but the damage is now a 2, and you still have to remove that 1 from the attack roll. So servo arms, yeah, better than Power Fists in that respect. He's got the Refractor Field, which he had before, but he's got Canticles of the Messiah, Master of Machines, Battle Codifier, Reprogramming, which you've got Field Reprogramming, and you've got Machine Sentience. So loads of new like little abilities there on how he works. You've got the Skitarii Infiltrators and the Ruststalkers. They've both had a power points cost drop. They're now power points cost of a 4 instead of the 6. The Infiltrators have the same stat line as they did before. The Flechette Blaster has the same rules, and the Stub Carbine also has the same rules. The Power Swords, of course, have got that universal increase of a strength +1, and the Taser Goads now have an arm penetration of -1, and you're getting 2 additional attacks, whereas before you were getting 3. You've got the Doctrina Imperatives, you've got the Enhanced Bionics, which is a big buff, because before they only had a 6+ save, now they've got 5+. They've got the Neurostatic Interference and the Infiltrating Positions and Voices in the Code. Their abilities work a little bit differently. The Ruststalkers, exactly the same stat line as well. The Transonic Blades have had a big buff. They're now arm penetration of -3, and you're getting mortal wounds. You were getting mortal wounds before, and the Transonic Razors have had a buff too, because they're now arm penetration of -2. So yeah, possibly worth taking now because of those increased armor penetration. They've got way more abilities as well. They've got Optimized Gate, they've got the 5+ Invulnerable, which the Infiltrators have now, and the Wasteland Stalkers, so they've had a nice buff. The Cerberus Raiders, which we didn't have in the old codex, we've got in the Psychic Awakening book, have had a buff and a debuff. Their toughness is better now. It's a 4, and I always said that it should be a 4 anyway. There's no reason why a mounted Skitarii should have the same toughness as a Skitarii, so that's great. However, they've dropped their wounds. They're now only 2 wounds instead of the 3, but they've increased the attacks to 2, and the save is still 4+. Their weapons, compared to before, the Archaeo Revolver is the same. The Galvanic Carbine has a nice arm penetration of -1 now, and 6s has a nice arm penetration of 1. You don't have to roll 6s for that. The Cavalry Sabre works as it did before, and the Clawed Limbs are exactly the same. They're now getting a better save because they've got Enhanced Bionics, which is a 5+ instead of used to be a 6. And they've still got the Eye of Cerberus, they've still got Skirmishing Line. They just don't have that enhanced data tether. You've got the Cerberus Sulphur Hounds as well. There's the same power points cost, and they've had the same buff as the Raiders. They've got the toughness 4, and they've got the 2 attacks now. The Phosphor Blast Carbine has had kind of a buff and a debuff. The range has decreased to 18 inches, but it's now Assault 2d3, so you can possibly get 6 shots with that thing. The Phosphor Blast Pistol is now d3 shots, which is fantastic, and it is a blast weapon. The Phosphor Pistol is exactly the same. The Sulphur Breath has had a buff. It's 12 inches instead of the 8 inches. And it's got an arm penetration of -2. The Arc Maul, it's called an Arc Maul now instead of a Power Maul. That's had a nice buff. That's had a strength +3, so that's strength 6, and a buff to the arm penetration as well. Abilities wise, they've still got Pistoliers, they've got Enhanced Bionics, so again you're getting a better invulnerable save, you're getting 5+, and you're still getting Rad Saturation too. So they've had a nice buff overall. The Taraxi Sterilizers, which again are in the Psychic Awakening book, you don't get them in the 8th edition. They remain the same power points cost, and their stat lines are the same. The Flechette Blaster remains the same. The Phosphor Torch is also the same. The Taraxi Talons are the same, but they lose out on that strength characteristic of +1, and the taser goad has had a nice little armor penetration of +1. They're getting the enhanced bionics again, so they're better invulnerable save of 5+. You're getting more attacks with the swooping strikes, which is the same as before. They're still getting the thermal riders rule, which was very, very useful. They've done away with that completely, which is a massive, massive change to the sterilizers. The Sky Stalkers, same power points cost, same stat line as before. The Flechette Blaster remains the same. The Flechette Carbine has had a debuff down to 18 inches, which isn't very good. And the Taser Goad again has had the AP increased. They've still got the new enhanced bionics, which is the 5+ invulnerable. They've got the thermal riders, but again they miss out on the arc grenade cluster. They no longer have that, which is absolutely ridiculous. They've really made both of these units worse because they've taken away those excellent abilities that they had. It's almost like they just copied and pasted both of these and had done with it, which is a shame. Then you've got the Iron Strider Ballistari, which you can find in the old book as well. The same power points cost, and they have had a buff with their save. They used to be 4+, they're now 3+, which is perfect, even better to take them. And of course you've got these new Cognis rules weapons. So Cognis weapons really do fire a lot of shots now. You've got the auto cannon, which fires 6 shots, and you've got the las cannon, which still fires the same number, but they're assault. All Cognis weapons are assault. Instead of damage D6 as well, it's actually better. It's D3 + 3. You've got the bionics, so you're getting the invulnerable save. You've got the broad spectrum data. You've got the explodes. So they work similar as before, but they're getting that better 3+ save. And the dragoons, should I say, they're still on the same page. They slight points increase, but they are getting more attacks now, which is fantastic. You get four attacks, and they're getting that better save of 3+. The Radium Jezzail has had a bump up to the armor penetration. It's now -2, and the Taser Lance has also had that increase to -2. But unfortunately, you're only getting 2 additional attacks, whereas before you were getting 3. You got the abilities from before as well. You've got Castellan robots, so we're on to heavy support here. They've had a slight power points cost decrease to 10 from 12, and they've had an increase to the number of wounds. They've got 7 wounds instead of them having 6. I always felt that was fair, having 3 wounds per robot, but I guess they've just given them an odd number of wounds, which it is odd for two units in there to have 7, but there we are. Their leadership and save remains the same. Now, weapons wise, the heavy phosphor blaster remains exactly the same. The Incendine Combustor has had an increase to the armor penetration. It's -2. The Castellan Phosphor Blaster, though, the Castellan Phosphor Blaster is now, instead of the fists, so they can have the fists or the Phosphor Blaster, and the Phosphor Blaster has a different set of rules to the Heavy Phosphor Blaster. Before, you could replace their fists with Heavy Phosphor Blasters. Now they have a weaker version, which is poor in my opinion. They should have kept it as they are, because they all look the same as well. But the Castellan Heavy Phosphor Blaster is worse range. Again, this is pointless. 24-inch, heavy 3. It has a worse AP, -1 instead of the 2. But funnily enough, it has better damage, so damage of 2 instead of the 1. The fist works the same as it did before, but you're getting an additional attack with the weapon, which is nice. And then you've got the abilities, you've got the battle protocols and the repulsor grid as well. Repulsor grid is very nice. You've got a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged weapons, and on 6s the attacking unit suffers a mortal wound, so it actually takes those ranged attacks and turns them into mortal wounds against your enemy. And one of the best shields that they've got, I think, one of the best abilities. Then you've got heavy support, so you've got the Scorpius Disintegrator, this lovely hover toaster, which I think isn't in the 8th edition book. I don't know why I'm even looking at that, but it has had a power points increase, unfortunately. Its stat line remains exactly the same though, but the cannon, the Belarus energy cannon, has had a buff to strength 6, It's got the blast rule, and it can still target units not visible to the bearer, which is fantastic. You've got the Cognus Heavy Stubber, which gets that normal buff of an extra shot, so you got and it's Assault 4 now. You've got the Disruptor Missile Launcher, which remains the same, but it's been given the blast rule. And then you've got the Ferromite Cannon, one of the main reasons why you'll pick it. That rule remains the same for that. You've still got Doctrina Imperatives, Explodes, Broad Spectrum Data Tether as well. The Onager Dune Crawler, or Onager Dune Crawler, however you want to pronounce it. It's had a slight power points cost decrease. Everything else remains the same, but the weapons, of course, anything with Cognus has had an extra shot or two. You've now got different profiles for some of the big weapons. So like the Daedalus Missile Launcher, it used to be called the Icarus Array, but for instance, the Missile Launcher has exactly the same rules there. The Gatling Rocket Launcher has the same rules, and the Icarus Autocannon has the same rules as well. The Neutron Laser has had a massive buff to a strength 12, and it's a D3+3, and also it's been given the blast rule. And the Onager Heavy Phosphor Blaster has been given another buff of 8 shots and a damage of 2 now as well. It's still got its invulnerable 5+ save, the Amanatus Force Field. But before, it had a really cool rule where if it was within 6 inches of another friendly onager, then you could re-roll the invulnerable saves. It doesn't have that anymore, unfortunately, guys. Scorpius Dune Rider, again, that was in the Psychic Awakening book, and that has had a power points increase as well. Same stat line as before, though. Obviously, the Cognus Heavy Stubber's got 4 shots now, and the twin Cognus Heavy Stubber has also got 8 shots instead of its previous 6. Still got all the same abilities. Then you've got the flyers, so you've got the Archaeopter Transvector. They're not in the 8th edition Codex, but they are in the Psychic Awakening book. They have had a power points increase. Everything else remains the same, except for the Cognus weapons. They've had extra shots included. Then you've got the Stratoraptor, which has had a bigger power points cost increase to a 9 from 7. And I guess it's because of the Cognus Las Cannon being Assault 2 now and damage D3+3. But yeah, it's got similar kind of rules. And then the Fusilier still has that bomb rack as well. And that is about it for the new Codex and the differences. Obviously, you know, missing the elephant in the room, which is all of the Knights, the Errant, the Paladin, the Warden, the Gallant, and the Crusader. I really wish that they'd had these in here along with the 2 Armigers, and actually even the Dominus Knights as well. Pretty much all the Knights in the new Mechanicus book. That would have been fantastic. But the back of the book talks about the weapon profiles. You've got the points values, you've got a bit of artwork, glossary, and a reference. Whereas the 8th edition book finishes off with the armory, so all the weapon profiles, some more artwork, some congregations of war, the stratagems, the warlord traits, the Arcana Mechanicum, and the points values, and then some tactical objectives, which were a little bit earlier in the 9th edition book. So there you go. Yeah, overall, Mechanicus have had a buff. You know, a lot of their units have dropped in price and their weapons have become undoubtedly better. Some of them more than others, some of them just remain the same though. The biggest winners in this is definitely the Engine Seer and the Kataphron Breachers, and to some extent the Sulphur Hounds in an odd kind of way. But what do you guys think of the Adeptus Mechanicus? Undoubtedly, I will have missed a few things in here, so please do, you know, help us all out in the community by putting them in the comments below, along with your thoughts and opinions. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The Emperor protects.